With the 50th anniversary of Star Trek, there have been a lot of celebrations about Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Picard, and the rest of the Enterprise crew over the years. However, there's one Star Trek character who was an important part of the franchise's history and who isn't talked about as often. And she's Yeoman Janice Rand. She's actually one of my favorite Star Trek characters, and certainly one of the most underrated. Despite her few appearances on the original series, she was a memorable presence, and she was supposed to have a bigger role, interestingly enough. When the character of Janice Rand was written and cast with Grace Lee Whitney in the role, Gene Roddenberry intended her to be a major part of the Enterprise, alongside Captain Kirk, Dr. McCoy, and Spock. Whether being in the landing party or assisting Kirk on his duties, she was meant to be the caring and affectionate aide to Kirk, while Spock would be the logical one and McCoy the pessimist of the group. Hints at a romance and mutual adoration would also spring up to the surface, but never meant to be acted upon. It was an interesting dynamic to explore, and I can imagine if she stayed on the series longer, a much more obvious romance would have ensued between Rand and Kirk. She first appeared in the series premiere The Man Trap, although this was at the point where the characters weren't quite fine-tuned. She actually shared a lot more screen time with Sulu, who in this episode worked in the Botanic Laboratory rather than as the ship's helmsman. However, in her scene, we got a sense of how seriously she took her duties, as she did not let a salt-sucking shapeshifter come near the lunch she was carrying. She had a much more pivotal role in Charlie X, in which an all-powerful teenager becomes smitten with her, and she tries to figure out how to be both friendly towards him while also letting him know she didn't have any romantic interest. This episode also showed her friendship with Lieutenant Uhura on the ship. I always like those moments on Star Trek where we just see the Enterprise crew on break, relaxing and enjoying each other's company. Another notable appearance was in the episode Miri, where the crew finds themselves on a planet where adults are immediately infected by a deadly virus, leaving only children alive. Kirk and the rest of the landing party are not surprisingly afflicted, and we see the rising tension of the crew try to figure out how to stop the virus. In this episode, we get some of the sense of how Kirk does care about Rand and sees her as more than just a Yeoman, much to the chagrin of a girl on the planet who develops a crush on him. A far more uncomfortable episode is The Enemy Within, in which a transport accident led to Kirk getting an evil double. While this does leave some great hammy acting from William Shatner, the scene where the evil Kirk assaults Rand is hard to watch. Spock's remark later on, when he asked Rand if he found something attractive about Kirk's evil double, seems surprisingly insensitive and out of character for the logical Vulcan. In the episode The Naked Time, the Enterprise crew starts to reveal and show their inner wishes, desires, and even demons. In Kirk's case, he reveals his love for Yeoman Rand to Spock. Sadly, Rand's appearances started being whittled down, and Grace Lee Whitney was ultimately told by NBC and the show's producers they were going to write her out of the show and let her contract go. So after a couple more filmed appearances, Rand suddenly stopped appearing without warning. There have been a number of theories as to why Whitney was let go and Rand was written out. The most often stated was the producers wanted Kirk to have intimate relationships with other women, usually a female guest star of the week, and didn't want him to be stuck with Janice Rand. The other is because of budget cuts they had to let one of the actors go, and unfortunately it was Whitney. However, I think the reason that holds the most water is an incident that happened during the filming of Miri. Whitney was lured away by an executive who tried to sexually assault her. Rather than have to face her every day, the Star Trek producers were told to let her go. After that, it seemed like there was a new Yeoman on the Enterprise every week, though Captain Kirk was more likely to have a liaison with whatever alien woman he met on his 5-year mission. That became a defining part of Kirk's character, but I'm sorry, for me, I'll always ship him with Janice Rand. The Star Trek firing sadly took a toll on Grace Lee Whitney, and she found herself depressed and unemployed. What would lift her spirits was when she attended Star Trek conventions in the 70s, and found out that many Trekkers wanted to know what happened to her and Janice Rand. When Paramount was interested in producing a new Star Trek television series, Gene Roddenberry let her know that Janice Rand would return and even get a promotion. When that show was cancelled and the pilot was rewritten into Star Trek the Motion Picture, Janice Rand made her return working as a transportation officer. Grace Lee Whitney had a quick cameo in Star Trek III The Search for Spock, and although it's not revealed as Rand, I like to think she decided to dye her hair for a brief period. In Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, we see Rand, along with Christine Chapel, as a communications officer as Starfleet tries to figure out how to stop that weird probe in the sky so intent on talking with humpback whales. She and Chapel originally had a lot more dialogue, but those scenes were ultimately cut from the final film. In Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, she worked on the USS Excelsior alongside Captain Sulu, and this proved the most active she was in any of the films. These events were revisited in the Star Trek Voyager episode Flashback, and I have to be honest, when I watched this episode, I mainly watched the Excelsior scenes. Yeah, I kind of have a hard time watching anything Star Trek related that doesn't involve the original series crew. Whitney reprised the role a couple more times in a couple of fan productions. Sadly, on May 1st, 2015, Grace Lee Whitney passed away, making these her last on-screen appearances. While she may have only appeared on 8 episodes of the original series and had only bit parts in the films, she certainly made a memorable impact. As much as I love the current series of Star Trek films, I'm surprised and disappointed we have not seen Janice Rand in any of them. Even Nurse Chapel got a reference. Maybe if they make one more Star Trek in the Kelvin universe, they can find a way to include her as both a tribute to the character and Grace Lee Whitney. See you next time.